Ba-ba-bum. Good time zone, everybody. It is Tuesday, and usually Tuesdays means Eberron here on Horde of Tales. But today we have a little bit of a different stream due to a few little scheduling issues. We decided to not have a game today, but instead we're just going to have a little bit of good old map making fun here. My name is Markus, known as the Chindividual, and usually I run the 5th edition D&D Eberron campaign on this channel, Convergence Manifesto. And in that campaign, I have been a big fan of using battle maps. In the virtual tabletops we use, I think battle maps and a well-made battle map can really enhance an encounter. And that is something that I would love to share today with you on what my process is on building battle maps, what tools I use, and you can just watch me put something together. So let's see what we end up with. I have a bit of a rough idea of what I want to build today. If at any point you are watching along and you have questions about making battle maps, like maybe things that you find challenging or hard to do when making a battle map for your own games, or you have some ideas of things we can put on our battle map, feel free to just shout on in chat. I'm keeping an eye on that, and let's also have a conversation. I'm not just going to be mapping here, I'm also going to enjoy a nice cup of tea while we're working here. And I will just also out loud tell you about my process. So without further ado, let's make a battle map. So as you can see on my screen here, my software of choice for making battle maps is Dungeondraft, which is created by Megasploot and has an adorable corgi as an icon, which is one of the big pluses of this software. But another thing I like about Dungeondraft is how easy and accessible it is to use. I myself, for example, I'm not a very graphical talented person. I have not much experience with graphical design or creating artworks. So Dungeondraft makes it a lot easier on building those kinds of maps for your games. And also the way the tool is set up, it's pretty easy to learn. I will say it is easy to learn, but there are things which I would say are maybe a bit harder to master, which leads me to the point where I want to point out that while I have experience working in Dungeondraft for a few years now, I would at no point consider myself an absolute pro in it. Especially if you look online in, for example, the Dungeondraft subreddit, there are people who build really amazing things, and that shows just the capability of this software. What I just want to show you today is a few of the basics to do that, and maybe delve into a few other principles. So let's get past this splash screen here. We're going to create a new map, and I'm just going to go for new. And as create a new map, we have a few options that we can go into. There's certain templates I can use. I will not go into that, but we're going to start working with our dimensions of the map. And this is where we should already start asking ourselves, what is going to be the purpose of this map? What is going to be the encounter we want to have here? So are we designing a map for a large-scale battlefield? Then, of course, it will probably be larger. Or is this going to be a cramped encounter in a dark and dank dungeon room? Then it will be smaller. Generally speaking, I would like to point out that, however, the larger you make your map, the more you will have to fill it with detail and keep it interesting. When you're not sure how big you want to make your map, I think it's always better to rather go for a smaller map than making it too large and thus having these blank spaces on it. Unless it's your point to show a big blank map. Also, what you might want to keep in mind is with the size of the map is how fast is your party? Like, do you have people, is your 5e Dungeons and Dragons party? Does it have like a monk in there that can go like 90 feet per turn, covering all of your map in one go? So that's all the kind of things to take into mind when building maps. I'm going to create a 20 by 20 tiles map. And tiles in this regard are going to be our nice squares on the map. In games like D&D and Pathfinder, a square is usually 5 feet of space. So with a 20 by 20 map, I'm going to make a map that is 100 feet by 100 feet, which for the average player character, if they're not going to burn their actions on moving, is going to take them somewhat more than about 3-4 turns to get from one side to the other map. I also already know that I want to do a little bit of an outdoors map, so I think 20 by 20 tiles is a good way to go here. So we leave it on 20 by 20, click OK, and it's going to get generated. And here we are. Look at all that dirt. Dirt offers possibilities. From dirt, we can make something. And we're going to make something from here. But I already know that I don't want to work with this as a basis. I was thinking more of going for a basis of a more green, luscious area full of life. So this dirt, while it is full of potential, it will not do. We will change it to something else. And I'm going to use the terrain brush for this. There are beautiful options here. And for example, currently my gravel is selected and I can change the size of the terrain brush. And what you see is when I'm going to brush with terrain, in this radial space, it can create paths, areas. And if I keep my mouse clicked on an area, it makes it a bit more firm. So you can already imagine this is great for creating a road, for example, a dirt track, something of the likes. We might get to that, but what we want to do for now is we want to fill this entire 20 by 20 tiles map just with grass. And I have a bit of terrain for that, and I'm going to select my grass, and I am going to use the fill function for that. So we're clicking on fill, and look at that. The mud turned into grass, as if there was a beautiful rain shower and suddenly all the grass that was hiding in the dirt has gotten some relief and has sprouted out, covering our fledgling battle map in a beautiful green. This is like the base I work with, like what's going to be the texture I work with most. And since I want this to be an outdoorsy area, we're going to use grass for that. I could, if I wanted to, at this point, already whip out the terrain brush and, for example, add some moss in there to give some shade, some variety to the background, but that might be something I want to touch up on later. For now, I come to think, am I just going to have this on firm ground, or are we also going to have a bit of water or the likes in there? Because for that, Dungeondraft also works with a nice little brush system where I could, for example, say, I want to have a little bit of water over here. Let's say we have a bit of water there. See? And then it completely magically gives us water. And you also see that it's currently animated. There's a little bit of movement in the waves. But if you, of course, export this map, that movement is not going to be in there. I could also, instead of having a little bit of a beach corner here, maybe I want to have a gentle stream rolling over my map, going all the way from here. And there we go. It's just appeared here on the map, and we would have water here. I actually like this water. I think I'm going to leave it on there. And before we move on to a next part of the map, I think it's good to think about your map in kind of layers. And usually the way I like to work through my map is going from my lowest layer, so the ground and the water and maybe rock plateaus and elevation. And once I have kind of like the geology of the map, I then add things like trees and foliage and buildings and the likes on top of it. So now that I have my grass and I have my river here, my little stream, I wouldn't call it a river. Like uh, at its widest, it's like 10 feet wide. Any character with a little bit of strength can leap over that. But now that I have my ground and my stream, what other kinds of geology do I want here? Now, at that point, I think it's good to talk about a few basic principles of interesting battle map design. And full disclaimer, I am not the kind of game master who is going to optimize all of his encounters to a tactical degree. While I do like to make challenges in fights, I'm not a tactician as a GM. However, it is good to consider a few things for the battle maps you build and how they can impact tactical decisions of not just your monsters or the opponents that you put on the battle map, but also of the player characters. Generally, there's four things I think about here. There is elevation, there is difficult terrain, there is cover, and there is line of sight. So elevation is something that we're going to get into real quick. Is just, are there areas that are higher on the map than other areas? Because elevation can offer both a vantage point for characters, might allow them to look over or past things that would block line of sight, but it can also make characters easier to target because they're higher up and thus people can see them easier. Difficult terrain is what I call a movement tax. So if you want to prevent characters from just strutting from one end to the battle map to the other, difficult terrain is a great way to break that up a bit, because in most game systems that have difficult terrain, like for example D&D and Pathfinder, you will have to pay extra movement to get through that difficult terrain. So it can slow things down for everyone who goes through that difficult terrain. Unless, of course, you're putting monsters on the map that can negate difficult terrain, or you have a ranger in your party that gets to negate certain kinds of difficult terrain. So that's elevation and difficult terrain. Then there's also line of sight and cover. And line of sight and cover kind of like cover a similar thing, pun intended. You have with line of sight, you can make sure that targeting creatures gets a lot harder. If you can draw a straight line of sight from one end of the map to the other, then of course your party's wizard is going to have a very easy time of just counterspelling enemy spells, or your ranged characters can just fire their arrows without problem. Having things that block line of sight, walls, large trees, buildings, can lead to decisions where characters have to move around to get past that line of sight or do something about it. Cover, in a similar vein, also offers tactical options. So, do I have rubble that people can hide behind? Are there low walls that they can duck behind? Cover is a great way to add line of sight, and in many game systems, going into cover actually has a rules benefit. It actually has a mechanical benefit to do so. So think about those things when you make your map. And the first one of these four things I'm going to think of now is a little bit of elevation. I like to make elevation feel little cliffs, and the way I like to do that in Dungeondraft is by using the path tool. Now, imagine the path tool is a way that lets you draw lines across the map. And what shape those lines have depends on what kind of path you use. For example, I have a path, for example, for a dirt road or like a dirt track. As you see, I'm drawing this around. There's someone who's been steering his cart in a circle here. Good job. You drove it in a circle. But I could also take my cliff path here and could make a little bit of an elevated area up here. Now you also see that I'm clicking at certain points to add curve to this. Always remember, especially with like natural terrain, things will not have, things in nature rarely have straight lines. They are curved, they have bends to them. Cliffs and edges are hardly ever like completely straight. So this little elevation I've added here, I also gave it a bit of a curve and it covers some of the terrain. That looks pretty nice. And I could also, I think I'm going to add another bit of that. Here we see something interesting. Now you see, since depending on from which direction I start drawing my path in Dungeondraft, you see that the shadow of the line comes in a different direction. Since I started in this, coming from this direction, going here, my shadow is here, but that doesn't look how I want it to. So I'm going to undo this and I'm going to start from a different direction. And now we see that I get the shadow and the depth that I wanted from the right side. I'm just going to move that over here and double click to end my curve. And that is magnificent. That gets us somewhere. All right. Now that we have the map over here, we have a little bit of elevation here. That's all good and nice. And I think maybe what I'm getting a feel here as I'm building this, I'm probably want to have a path going here through the woods. Maybe this is a travel path where carts go through to make it through this area. And of course, the path will be leading through these hills, or like hills, these bits of elevation. And I think I'm actually going to make this a bit of, no. That line doesn't look nice. This is the great thing about working in digital software. You can just press the undo button as you make things work. So I'm going to bring that over here, and voila, we have two little layers here. So characters could like come up here on this side of the hill, have a bit of vantage, or even go up even higher and have a vantage point up here. I like that. That's good. Probably other side of my little stream here, I'm not going to do anything with elevation right now. We're going to keep that for later. Let's keep that for later. I was talking about making a bit of a trail through the woods here. So since I'm still in my path tool, I am going to make a bit of a trail. And I think I'm going to leave that trail up there. I don't know, how far are cartwheels apart? I have to say my knowledge on wagons and the likes is not fairly large. So I'm going to put that here. I want to get a bit of the effect that there's a cart that regularly moves through here. And as we zoom in a little bit, we also see that this kind of line has a little bit of dirt on the edges here. Just want to make sure. I actually think I'm going to make these a little wider. That's also something that I can do in Dungeondraft. I'm going to make this a little bit wider. And now you see a bit better that there is probably a cart that belongs to these trails. And I'm going to move that over here. A little bit of muddiness, a little bit of here. Maybe I'm actually going to go back to my terrain brush and let's see what happens if I add a little. Oh, wait, I'm going to make my terrain brush a bit smaller. And I'm just going to, let's see, how does this look? Adding in a few speckles of dirt here. Now, this was a typical case of this looked better in my mind than it does in practice, but again, use the power of the undo button. try your ideas. Also, this is one of the important things on building a battle map. Just try things out. See how things look. Sometimes things end up looking way better than you would have expected them to look. But I do think I might want to add a little bit of sand here to edge. A little bit here. Not too much, just a little bit of sand over there. Da, 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 da. Let's just draw that here. Maybe I'll decide later on I don't want the sand there. Maybe once we're a little bit further in building this, I come to the conclusion that the sand does not look good. Right now, I like my sand. It might be coarse, it might be rough and getting everywhere, but dang it, it's now part of this battle map for now. So we draw that here, put that there, and have a little bit of depth to this. Let's zoom out a bit. Alrighty, good. Now, I want to make sure that our cart tracks continue on the other side of the little stream. Still have my path tool, and we're just going to have them pick up from here and make their way out of this place. Wherever they might go. Maybe there's like important carts that come by here, filled with treasure, going to a big city nearby. Who knows? It's the beauty of making maps. You get to imagine the stories they belong to. Also, so we have a bit of elevation. I have this idea that there's a cart path going through here. There's a bit of a river. I do think, however, that still with just one tone of grass, this might look a little bit bland. It's a little bit flat. So I'm going to add a dash of making this who. You didn't see that. That didn't happen. What I'm going to say is I am going to add a little bit of, let's add a little bit of darker mossy areas here in the shade of our elevations. Just some places, breaking it up a little. I will tell you, I don't know what the rules are for moss growing somewhere. I've always been told in fantasy and adventure novels, it grows on certain sides of trees. I don't know if that's true. On this map, it grows as we want it to grow to add a little bit of texture to a map. Just a little bit of that. All right, see? Got already a bit more. Look at all of that. It is magnificent. All right, so let's see. We're in regards to our geology, so our base layer, I think for now, we're pretty good. I have an idea of what this terrain looks like, and we can start flashing it out with objects. Well, objects is the term that Dungeondraft uses for practically anything that you can put on a map. And Dungeondraft itself already comes with a vast assortment of assets to use for that. So far, for my home games, I sometimes use third-party assets to build these maps, but in most of my maps, I have to say, I've had enough with the assets that came with Dungeondraft. And in this map, I'm just going to use basic Dungeondraft assets. So those are included in the software. All right. Important thing, if you ever did any kind of work in any kind of graphical software or something, you might be familiar with the idea of layers. And Dungeondraft also works with layers. The higher the number of the layer, the higher up it's in the hierarchy. So if I put something on my layer 4, that is above anything on my layer 3. So in that way, I can also create depth through layers. I could, for example, put a very big tree on layer 4 and then make like clusters of smaller trees on layer 3 to get the impression of a group of trees growing together. I'm going to demonstrate that. Selecting my layer 4, and I am going to pick my category. They're nicely categorized, and I go to trees, and I have a nice selection of trees. What kind of trees are we having here? We could, for example, have a beautiful autumn tree, maybe spin it around a little, put it up here somewhere, watching over a little stream. Or how about we take a bit of a cherry tree? I just have to say, I love the pink on these trees. It's beautiful. Let's say I'm putting this on my layer 4, and put that here. And now I'm going to my layer 3, and I pick a different tree. And you see, since it is on layer 3, it is now underneath my cherry tree. So if I put this other tree here on layer 3, maybe over here, it clearly shows us that even though this tree might be a bit bigger, our cherry tree is at a higher position, looming over the other tree, and looks pretty nice over there. I actually like this. I'm going to put a few more trees around my map. Let's see. Well, are we going to have like a mixed forest? Are we going to have trees with leaves mixed with pine trees? This is a fantasy map. We can put all of the trees together. And also mixed forests turn out to be healthier than like just pine or like leaf tree forests. Seems to have to do with how deep the roots grow. I'm gonna put that tree over there. I'm gonna spin the same tree a bit, like I'm using my mouse wheel to spin this one a little bit. And I think I want to have a tree close to the water. I want to have a dead tree close to the water. Now you might be asking, Marcus, why should there be a dead tree close to the water? It's close to water, should be able to have all it needs, right? Should be able to get all the water it needs, just like I should be able to get all the tea I need. Thank you very much for the stay hydrated, Pan. That was good. But if the tree is close to the water, why is it so dead? Well, who knows? It's a mystery we can find out. I'm going to put it here, this dead tree. Maybe it's haunted. Who knows? Let's put around some more trees. I want to have one more over here. And let's put that one over here. I just sometimes this is a nice big one. You see, what I like to do is put like these big ones at the edges of the map. Like this. And this one over here. Put in a little bit more color. Going to go down a layer, and this one over there. This one over here. And what do we have here? This one's too big. Now, of course, you could also, in your, as you can also increase and decrease the scale of everything, I could make these trees also a little bit smaller. But I think they are just good the way they are. And let's put a little bit more of autumn color over here. There we go. Might be still a little bit. Let's give a little bit of more pink over there. Ta-da! Now look at that. We have a few trees placed over here, just making our little forest, blossom, and shine, and being tree. Now I'm just going still adding a few more trees here and there, like here, and one there. And let's put a big one. I like how this looks. Now it seems like the stream is coming out there. Maybe move this over here. That over there. We have a few trees here that we're going to put out here. And there, and there. See, that's quite some arboreal appearance that we have here now. And we can already see, we still show here that we have a bit of, we have the elevation on the terrain. We might have people hiding in the trees, hiding behind trees. For example, right over here behind this big autumn tree, there could be someone ducking in there for some cover. We have things that could block line of sight, but I will want to add a few more. We get to that in the next phase. But as far as it goes, we're like 30 minutes in, and we've built something that with this, you could already do a simple encounter somewhere in the forest, somewhere where the party is traveling through, they're following the trails of a lost wagon, and something could happen here. And maybe there was already something happening here. Because we can add a few more decorations to go, a little bit more stuff that we might want to do. But before we get into that, I'm going to have myself a bit of a think of what that's going to be. And if you have any ideas of what you might want to put in here, what kind of things we could still add to this little map, feel free to put them in chat. Feel free to share your ideas. Will there be maybe goblins who set up a barricade here? Is there a broken bridge that can complicate things? Or is there something else going on here? Feel free to drop that in chat. I am going to refill my drink real quick. Going on a little break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes, and then we're going to clean up our map here. So be back in 5 minutes. And there we go again. Refilled those drinks, stretched the legs a little bit, and we're going to continue a little bit more on our map. And during my break, as I was brewing myself a bit more delicious tea, I was thinking I want to have a bit of a encounter on the other side of the stream here. Because I found myself, even though I mentioned that things like cover and the likes can add some technical elements, I didn't really highlight that yet. So what I want to do is I want to maybe have on this side of the stream, there's going to be some improvised barricades, some kind of defenses that whatever foes the player characters would fight on this map has thrown up. And Dungeondraft comes with a feel like typical barricades, like for example these what they seem to call cheval de frise, if I pronounced that correctly, or this buried wood, which I think makes for some great defenses that someone has thrown up here. So we're going to put one of there over here and one over there. And maybe if I have something like some kind of rubble or the like, some wood that they, yes, they also put down, they uprooted a tree over here, and they're really making a bit of a barricade with that. So you could imagine that behind this barricade, there would be some foes that have set up shop, and they are hiding behind these defenses. So the player characters who might be coming over from the western side of the map, they will have this against them first. There's going to be their enemies might be in cover. They might even not be in line of sight technically for the characters. But since we have elevation on our map, one of the characters might want to get up on the cliff here or over there to get on an elevated area and thus get a shot over that cover that the foes have set up there. Now, these foes, they've also been here for a while, so they have made themselves a little bit of a camp out here. You know what? I'm even going to give them, they're going to have some bedrolls. They've been staying here. Maybe these are highwaymen or kind of bandits that are asking for kind of for some kind of toll to pass this this place. So we're going to put that over there. And since there's a few, this is an area where people have been walking around. I'm going to add a bit of dirt around here, around the camp, a little bit over here, around the fire, a little bit of dirt around. Actually, I don't like the dirt. I'm going to undo the dirt. Be gone, dirt. There you go. I want it gone. Here we see one of the limitations of Dungeondraft. You cannot undo infinitely, so I will have to just draw over this dirt. There we go. So we put that over here. We have a bit of a camp of bandits there. There might be some more stuff. Of course, if they're, maybe they already have some loot with them. They actually got a few barrels of whatever has been shipped around here. Got a bit of that. It's good. And I also think to make things extra hard, they actually went ahead and sank the bridge. But you see now my bridge that I draw here, it's over the water. I want it under the water. These individuals sank a bridge. So I am going to put the remains of it underwater. Look at that. It's sunk. They did that. So we have that over here. Enemy camp here. Player characters coming from this end. And I think this is a place where I could run an encounter on, where I could have a fight on. I'm just going to move on to my finishing touches. One thing I like to use for that is things like the material brush, where I can, for example, add a little bit of high grass. And you see this already adds more texture to my map. I can actually go in different places, and I could actually make also layers of it. Make some really high grass here. Look at that. Now that is a grassy knoll. Put that over there. Add in a little bit of that. Watch out. And here's the thing. You see that it peeks out under here. It peeks out a bit. I don't want that. Make this smaller. Put that in here. Over here. What other kind of textures I could throw in? Well, what does a Cloverfield tile do? It's a little bit too green for my taste. A little bit too green of that. I have a gold tile. Yes, these bandits might have a pile of gold. No, they don't. Let's not give them a pile of gold. Let's see. I think with just a little bit more patches of grass, we're adding some detail here. The thing is, it's very easy to make a map that is also too crowded. That's the opposite problem of having a map that is too empty. But I think this little thing, we have quite something going on here. Is it comparable to a super fancy detailed battle map? It sure isn't. But I think that maps like these still look great and they still get the job done of giving your players on your virtual tabletop, or even if you print these out and put them on the table, a good overview of what's happening. Where are we? While also helping with the immersion. You didn't just draw out on a wet erase map a few lines. You have a bit more to look at. And that can really help with getting into the scene. One thing I still want to show, still got some time left, and we're gonna, I want to give you a bit of a show of what you can also do with lighting in the map, because lighting, talking about immersion and moods, and also talking about posture checks. Thanks very much for the reminder. I was already shrimping again. I want to show you a little bit with how you can add to the mood and immersion of a map by adding lighting to it. And Dungeondraft has built-in lighting for that. It has the environmental lighting, which is standard set to white. And if I, for example, turn this down a bit, it gets dark. Or I could actually give this a color shade. For example, let's say our character is in a magical area. We could give it a bit of this kind of color tone, but I don't want that. I want to show you what happens if I turn my map a little bit darker, saying that this might happen at nighttime, and I'm going to add a light source to it. For example, the campfire here in the center is burning. And we have added a bit of a light source here. Maybe you see already that this adds a little bit of mood and atmosphere to your map. And you could consider, if you're not sure at what time of day this encounter is happening, you could make different versions of the same map with different lighting settings. You could have one for during the broad day, one during dusk, or one during the middle of the night by just adjusting the lighting of your map. One word of advice, if you're planning on using the map in a virtual tabletop that has dynamic lighting, I would advise to not do lighting on your map in Dungeondraft and rather do it in your virtual tabletop. For example, when I prepare a map for use in Foundry VTT, I don't do the lighting in Dungeondraft, I do it in Foundry. I do know for Foundry, there's a plugin that lets you import a Dungeondraft map that you have lightings on. It would translate that to the correct lightings in Foundry. I haven't tested that plugin yet. I've heard good things about it, but if you're not using that plugin, or if you're using a different virtual tabletop, like for example, Roll20, I would suggest doing the lighting in the actual virtual tabletop, because that works even better than having it hard-coded in your map. For this map, I don't want the lighting. I'm going to undo it. I'm going to, this is one fight that's going to happen during the broad daylight. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. And that is what we're going to work with for now. So in approximately about just less than 50 minutes, we put together a map. We have a map here with elevation. We have a map with a bit of terrain that we can play with. We have a map that is ready for an encounter that we can run on this. and to put into action. To repeat, the way that I think about when making a map, I always first want to take into consideration what kind of encounter I'm building. For this little stream, I went in blind and I just build as I felt building. But usually I always try to consider from the start, like, what kind of encounter am I making here? I try to think about the 4 points of elevation, line of sight, cover, and difficult terrain. And on this map, we have elevation, we have things that provide cover and can block line of sight, and we do have difficult terrain in the form of a stream that we don't have any bridge to come over with. And then work out my map in different layers. Start with the geology of the map, with whatever kind of water and ground and cliffs I might have in there, and then work my way up. And finally, adding in details to the map. And that brings us a nice little end result. I'm going to save and export this map. And if you might want to use this map yourself, I'm going to post it on our Horde of Tales Discord. If you are not yet a member of the Horde of Tales Discord, you can just use the links down below the stream to join our Discord. Just jump aboard to join in interesting and fun discussions and keep tabs on what we're doing on this stream. You can also follow us on our Twitter, which is also down below the stream, to always keep abreast of when we're going live. As said at the start of the stream, usually on Tuesdays, we're running Convergence Manifesto, a 5th edition D&D campaign set in Eberron and following the adventures of the Convergence Manifesto adventuring series. And we will continue that next week on Tuesday. Also, we are still currently up for votes for the Game Herds Award. We have had the honor of being nominated for the Game Herds Awards 2022 in the category for Stream Team of the Year. And if you want to help us go all the way, you can click on the link in the chat to help us win this great award that we've been nominated for. Also, what might be interesting to note, we're also, parts of our team are also involved in an upcoming stream project for a very good cause, which goes by the name of Roll for Good. If you want to help gathering money for a great charity while also playing tabletop RPGs with fantastic people, check out the Twitter of Roll for Good that I just dropped into the chat and sign up and see how you can help out with this great initiative. With that being said, I thank you all for hanging out with me on this chill Tuesday, whatever time it is where you are. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for listening to my ramblings about building battle maps and sipping a bit of tea with me. My name is Markus. I'm the Chindividual, and I wish you a great day. See you next time.